Welcome to another round of coffee and donuts. This is where we answer your questions to the police hiring process and anything else we can to get you through and succeeding in your law enforcement career. We have 3 pre-submitted questions. Let's discuss. Before we get started, if you want your questions answered, we answer every question we can come across over on our social platforms as well as our new blog. So you can find those links down in the description. Leave a question. We will get around and answer it, and you have a chance of it ending up here on Coffee and Donuts. Now, the first question. A department asked me to take a second polygraph because of an area of concern from the first one. Does it mean I failed the first one? Yes and no. Actually, I shouldn't say yes and no. Chances are no. If you failed the first one, they would have just told you you're done. Now, understand the polygraph isn't perfect, right? It's once again, it's not allowed to be used in courts for certain types of trials, other things like that. But it's not the perfect system. One, it is a machine, so that's not perfect because it's created by individuals with human error. It's interpreted by humans, so once again, human error is another possibility. So the big thing with it is a lot of times when we see a candidate have to go back, it means that they found something that was inconclusive. Not a fail, not really a perfect just glide on through pass, and they want to readdress that specific issue. And it's usually called a specific issue exam, where you go in, you retake the polygraph or the CVSA. I use the term polygraph to cover both of those. And you go in there and you redo questions surrounding that specific question. Now, you're not just going to answer one question. They'll ask you a couple different questions in a couple different ways. And a lot of it, and the inside tip to this, is to see if you come back and add something to it. Anything that you add after you've submitted your background packet or after you've submitted your polygraph pre-screening questionnaire, there we go, got it out, is going to be considered admission after the fact and can potentially DQ you. So your best bet is to be honest and upfront from the beginning. And it's not your best bet, it's really your only way. Be honest and upfront from the beginning. Stay consistent with your honest answers and you'll be good to go. But yes, we have a lot of candidates that we've seen across our time doing this, really, that have come across and said, hey, I got to go back for a follow-up poly. I tell them, don't worry about it. Just go in there, remain honest, remain consistent. You should be good to go. But it's a great question, and don't feel too intimidated if you have to go back. It's a very common occurrence. I wouldn't say it happens more than 50% of the time, but it does happen quite a bit throughout every single hiring announcement. Cannot speak today. Wow. Okay, next question. Let's see if I can do this one any better. On the note of relatable work experience, when going through the oral board and answering questions, tell me about yourself. Should I only mention relevant experience, for example, Marine Corps experience, IT experience, retail, etc.? Should I only mention the military since the others don't really apply? This is something when I'm working with a candidate, the first thing I tell them to do is send me their resume. And a lot of individuals say, Frank, they don't even ask me for a resume. That's great, but the downside to this is they might not ask you for a resume, but you need to be able to articulate your experiences. So starting with written articulation followed by verbal articulation is the best way to do that. If you think about it, no one's sitting over your shoulder, no one's testing you right then and there on the spot while you're writing your resume. So that's the best time to really sit down and see how your skills translate. If I would to look at this retail experience, I would say, hey, if you have retail experience, you probably have customer service experience, which means you probably have communication experience, which probably means you have some de-escalation experience if you've ever dealt with an individual who's maybe irate or having a bad day. And it doesn't even mean that customer is wrong or anything like that, but maybe they just were having a bad day and you had to de-escalate the situation. Right? Maybe you had to deal with someone who was dealing with theft and you had to call local law enforcement. So you've coordinated law enforcement to assist in retail theft or something along those lines. Same with IT. If I were to look at IT, you have to use computer systems in law enforcement, whether you have a CAD, computer assisted device in your car, right? Or computer assisted dispatch, computer aided dispatch. There we go. I would say that the biggest thing with IT is relaying that, hey, I'm competent in using IT in my daily duties, right? So that's something that translates over. For Marine Corps, there's a lot that translate over there. Structure, commitment, teamwork, integrity, all that stuff aspects, physical fitness, attention to detail, situational awareness, self-defense. A lot of that can translate over as well. So I think you can really switch that brain around to more think of this as, or flip that switch in your brain to think of this more as, hey, how do I relate all my experience to law enforcement? Because law enforcement, that's what it is. It's just a daily patrol of normal society operations, right? If the typical stuff, don't hurt other people, don't steal from other people, you know, please drive safely because it could hurt other people. And it's just a protection of what society has agreed to as the rules and regulations. So there's a lot that goes into it, but I think for this specific question is you can take your examples here, your experiences, and actually relate them over in more ways than you can think. And I see this a lot on a lot of people's applications, on their resumes. Focus on a resume, create your resume, see how all those skills relate over to law enforcement. Print out a position description, which is the duties of a law enforcement officer, and see what skills you have that correlate over. If it's, hey, communicating with the public, you probably did that in retail. So it's a good way to look at it. This next question, about association with criminals. My brother is incarcerated for a certain crime. It's reasonable to visit. Isn't it reasonable to visit your brother at prison, or is it expected to start disassociating even with your brother? That is a tough one. I understand the turmoil there. Let me just kind of lay it out for you from the facts. Whether I agree with it or not, these are just the facts. Any association you have with any criminal element is going to be a hurdle in your hiring process. Can you articulate it? Can it be understandable? Yes. Hey, this is my brother. It was for a mistake that was made. He was sentenced time in jail or prison. But they're gonna look at it. They're gonna look at prison logs. How often do you visit? Have you ever provided them anything, any financial compensation, commissary, anything like that? It will come up. Whether it gets you immediately disqualified, and I wouldn't say immediately disqualified, whether it gets you disqualified, it can. They can look at this and say, hey, individual has an association with the criminal element. But I think if you had a chance to articulate this and explain it based on the circumstances, and it's not something that it's still a crime, right? I'm trying to figure out the words I want to use to articulate this best. But pretty much what I'm trying to say here is the fact that this isn't one of those crimes where an individual is, part of a major criminal organization or criminal element, right? And that's what they're really looking for when they look at criminal association. But this will come up, absolutely. And articulating this properly is going to be the biggest thing that is going to have an impact whether or not they decide to move forward with you just past the background phase. All right, you still have to pass all the other, but this is going to come up, and this could possibly even come up in your psychological assessment too. So there's a lot here. Do your best to articulate it, right? Depending on how much you engage with any individual. And this doesn't have to be just this specific situation. Anytime you engage with criminal element, even though you're not engaged in criminal activity, right? So where you have associations with people from your past or anything, it's going to be evaluated, and they're going to look at it and say, hey, is this the candidate that we want, or do we have other candidates that are more highly qualified because they don't have that criminal association? So yeah, for the purposes of getting hired, the biggest distance and separation you could have from individuals with prior criminal activity or criminal element is going to help you get hired. I understand the personal aspect of trying to separate from a close family member. I can see where you're coming from, where the question's a hard one for you to decide whether or not to pursue the profession. But it will come up, just so you know. All right. I hope this helps. If you want your questions answered, you can submit them here in our comment sections or any of our comment sections on any of our social platforms or over in our new blog. We try to get to all those in a timely manner. I will see you next time, and stay safe.